can get a bit scary when things go pear-shaped in business. Who can I ask for advice on how to deal with this and how much is it going to cost? Or would it just be best to write it all off? Hard to tell. But the Small Business Development Corporation offers a dispute resolution service. If you're having a dispute with another business, a government agency or department, or in a commercial tenancy dispute, which means between a tenant and a landlord, where one or both of the parties is a small business. I am speaking with Chantelle Barrett, who's a case manager at the SBDC today, about how that process works. And of course, I've got the ever-present Kat Paz with me. G'day, Chantelle. G'day, Kaz.
Hi, how's it going?
Hello, how are you?
Fantastic. Well, let's start at the beginning. Why is it so important for small business owners to have a service like this, Chantelle?
Well, I think we find that where there's people and there's money, disputes tend to happen, and small business is no different. To put it in perspective, we had 421 small businesses approach us just last year in order to get help resolving their disputes. And that's probably a quiet year.
Oh, is it? Wow.
Particularly for businesses dealing with customers and suppliers, disputes can cost you a lot of time and money and a lot of stress as well. And a lot of small businesses, are running on tight cash flow. So anything we can do to assist, we're happy to do. Sometimes there's just a benefit in having a third party intervene, take a bit of emotion out of the situation, and help the parties clarify what their obligations might be to the other party, and also outline some risks about heading to court, because we find a lot of people, when they get in dispute, sort of say, we're taking this to court, without really realising what that entails.
Absolutely. And of course, I guess you're the best place to go to start with, to say, do I have a dispute here? What am I doing here?
Exactly. Some people have some misapprehension of what their obligations might be or what they should expect from another party, and sometimes we can help clarify that. We don't give legal advice, but there is a lot of information out there, particularly when you're dealing with things like Australian consumer law or retail leasing law. We can sort of send you to the right sources.
What are the most common disputes that you see, given that there's 400? I'm still, my gob was open all this time, yeah.
It sounds like a lot of disputes, but as you can imagine, a lot of them we see are variations of each other, and a lot of them depend on what's going on in the wider economy at the time as well. At the moment, we're seeing a lot of contractual disputes where people are trying to get out of contracts, or people are trying to collect unpaid debts, or have a service or a good that's been defective and are trying to get a refund or a replacement for that. In the commercial tenancy field, because we're coming to the end of the mining boom, we see a lot of commercial tenancies that are coming up to their end dates. People are trying to renegotiate rents and do it at a market rent, which for a long, long time was going up and up and up. And now is going down and down and down, so that can cause problems. I'm sure you've heard a lot about some of the franchising disputes that have been going on with 7-Eleven, Aussie Farmers Direct, that's just gone into administration. We're approached by a lot of franchisees, actually. That's quite a big area for us. And we're also approached by people trying to get help constructing websites. A lot of small businesses get a lot of business and drive their business through their website. So you can imagine that if you've got a website, you've gone to a website developer, you haven't got what you thought you were going to get, or it's taking a really long time. That's going to prevent you in some cases from even starting your business. So that can be a real element of stress there.
That is so common.
I hadn't actually considered that website aspect of it. Are there any things that you can't handle?
Because ours is a voluntary service, a lot of what we depend on is the parties that are willing to work together to find a compromise or to find a way forward. So if you have parties that are really dead set on not compromising or enforcing their rights, then we'll often pop them across to the Magistrates Court. We don't deal with personal disputes. Say if you've bought a car and you're having a problem with the dealership perhaps, and the car has been purchased in your own name, that's generally a consumer dispute. Okay. So we'll pop you across to the, used to be the Department of Commerce. It's now some other name that I can't remember.
Name, actually, yes.
I think of infrastructure and mining or something along those lines. And the ACCC is there as well.
Okay, so you've got a lot of options, but you guys are the best place to come to start.
For small businesses, yes, it's a good, and if we can't help you, we can often identify who can help you and point you in that direction.
So what do you need to have your representation or, dispute resolution services, do you need legal representation? Do you need to prepare a bunch of stuff before you get there?
No, not at all. We have a really great advisory service at the SBDC, and generally if you call into the advisory hotline, you will get one of our advisors first up, and you can explain a little bit about what your dispute's about or the situation you found yourself in. They'll ask you a few preliminary questions, such as have you advised the other party that you have an issue with them? Have you written a letter or given them a period of time in which to get back to you? And we generally expect that parties would have at least made contact with the other party and possibly had a response back before they come to us. But then again, it depends on what the dispute is. If it's a dispute where there's an urgency to it, we can get involved fairly quickly.
Okay. Oh, that's good to know. I can see where you're coming from with the economy, how it's driven by the economy. So, of course, commercial leases maybe 6 years ago wouldn't have been an issue because space was quite rare. You take anything. But then I have seen clients with the same contract terms going over a decade. And I do wonder.
Yeah, and there's changes in the law that applies to some of those. A lot of small businesses find themselves in retail shop leases, which have, there's legislation there to support the tenant in many cases.
Oh, nice.
And so leases can say whatever they like, but they also have to comply with the law. So there can be issues along those lines. And sometimes the parties, the landlord or the tenant, aren't aware that there's other provisions that are applied to those leases.
Okay.
So what sort of outcomes do you see from your dispute resolution services? We
get a range of outcomes. We really like to help the parties get to a negotiated resolution and they can sort of draw a line under it and move on. That's the best case scenario. It doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes if we can just help parties clarify maybe their expectations with dispute or be a little bit realistic about what they're after or send them somewhere, if we can't help them, as we've said before, we can send them to other sources of information. And sometimes we need to tell them you really need to go and get some legal advice as well. So I think anything we can do to further the dispute, to get them out of the deadlock that they're in and get them a little bit closer to resolution, that's a really good outcome for us.
I'd say that word deadlock is,
Yeah. And a lot of these disputes have been running for some time by the time they come to us. And there's a reason, nothing's ever really simple. There's a reason the parties can't get to a resolution on their own. So we try and recognise what that is and move them forward.
And there's emotion as well, which is unfortunate because now you're dealing with personalities and not so much.
If things have been going on for some time, that's often become a big issue, and some parties won't talk to each other anymore. So just having somebody that can sit in the middle and almost act as a go-between, that can make all the difference to getting things sorted out.
You are the meat in the resolution sandwich.
That's exactly right.
Now, it does come at a cost, but it's really reasonable, isn't it?
Well, actually, our initial service where you deal with a case manager, and a lot of our cases are resolved that way, is completely free. So getting advice from one of our advisors, our general advisors or our commercial tenancy advisors, completely free. When it gets pushed across to ADR, again, completely free, and we get a lot of good results that way. We also have a mediation service though. So if I'm having difficulty or the other case managers are having difficulty getting the parties to get to a resolution, or there's a lot of issues in dispute, we can introduce them to our mediation service. $125 per person, which in terms of I don't know if you've ever been into mediation, but if you're looking at private costs, they can be thousands of dollars for the day.
$450 an hour.
Yeah, something crazy like that.
I'm speaking from experience, and I'm actually surprised
mackerel.
It's still $125 per party.
Yeah, $125 per party, and you can come in and you have a professional mediator to sit down with you for the day. We generally expect...
Hang on. How much is $125 for an hour or the day?
For the day. And that includes things.
Really?
Yep.
Compared to $450 for an hour.
Yeah, and that's at our offices as well, so you don't have to go and find somewhere neutral to have it. That's you come in and you can have the opportunity to sit down with another party, and that can be a very successful way to get to a resolution also.
Chantelle, I think the SBDC has saved a lot of sanity out there.
Yes.
They saved mine, that's for sure.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
No, it's a really great service. So as we say to people, always pick up the phone, don't be scared. The quicker you contact us, the quicker we can help you.
So how long does it generally take? Because I know they're all different. Does it take to resolve a dispute?
It depends on, again, the dispute, and it depends on the willingness of the parties to engage as well. Usually it can be anywhere from a day to a couple of weeks for more general contractual disputes. I just looked at some of our results with mediation, and from parties lodging a dispute with us to reaching a successful conclusion, I think we had an average last year of about 60 days. So you're looking at about 3 months, and some of these disputes have been dragging on for a lot longer than that. So even those timeframes are pretty good.
Once again, sanity savers.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Well, as someone who's been through mediation, and I'm glad to know I'm in the statistics of 3 months, because I thought this is crazy. What can business owners do to avoid disputes in the first place?
Well, the most obvious, which sounds silly, is to read contracts and read leases. I'm amazed. So many of these are effectively agreements where you are agreeing to pay very large sums of money that you could have your house, securing
Yes.
your obligations there as well. And it's amazing how many people haven't read the contract or haven't read their lease. So I would always say, before you sign anything, read it.
Some people don't know what a caveat is.
No, and a lot of people, I think, are scared by the terminology used as well. It becomes very legalistic, and people assume that if they don't understand it, it's because they're not smart enough. And that is completely not true. You may not have that same level of knowledge or understanding of legal terms. But I always say, if you read a contract or if you read a lease and you don't understand what it says, ask, because sometimes it's the case that the person who's drafted it doesn't understand what it says either. That's not that uncommon. If you don't understand it, always ask questions.
That's really important. And of course, I think if people do read contract terms and know that there's help out there, then a lot of these things get cancelled. I mean, the shoulda, coulda, woulda kicks in for a lot of people. But there's that desperation. You really need that lease. You really need to get your business started. It's been 2 months. We've been doing this. So people just go, I'll just sign it.
And people get scared about the cost. So many people don't take legal advice going into, big arrangements. And the best thing that they can do in that case is call some of our commercial tenancy advisors. It's completely cheap. They deal with this stuff every day, so you know that you're going to get people who know what they're talking about. And if there's any red flags, if there's any issues that you need to consider, they can inform you pretty quickly. They won't sit down and read your lease for you like a lawyer will, but they can certainly give you some of the things to look out for and just put you in a position where you've got a little bit more knowledge in your pocket, and that can make all the difference as to whether you have a really seamless good experience as a tenant or whether you end up with us later on.
Yeah, it could save you a lot of heartache later on.
Definitely,
just that little bit of...
A lot of people don't realise some leases, if you don't give notice, it's automatically rolled over into another term.
Yes, and there's new laws that have come into effect, consumer laws that have come in about unfair contracts, where things like automatic rollover terms are not necessarily applicable anymore. So if you're in a situation like that, it's really important to try and get some advice from us, and free advice from us, and that can save you a lot of heartache, because sometimes you think you're in dispute and you're not actually in dispute at all, because the other party doesn't have the right to do what they're doing. So we can things like that can really simplify and clarify things for parties.
So if you're cranky about something, you might need not to be because you're in the right. Yeah. Oh, that's great. Yeah. Oh, win. Yeah.
And there's a few of those, unexpected wins, which are nice, and it can go away quite quickly.
Oh. That is so comforting to hear, like alternative dispute resolution for small businesses. It's really important, and I wish a lot more people knew about it, because it will save so much time, like you said, time, money. And then when it gets emotional, it's so hard to think clearly.
And you've got to remember that your suppliers and your customers are often people that you don't deal with one-off. You deal with them on several occasions, and it may be really difficult that if your relationship has started to become problematic, these still may be people that you need to deal with in the future. So sometimes having a third party come in can help ease the tension a bit, and also means that you can sort your dispute out, but you can also work with these people later. And in Perth, that's a really important element.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess it's also important to go and lance the boil earlier rather than later. Don't leave it to linger.
Yeah, that's very true. If you've caught us and you've been locked out of your premises, there's not much we can do at that point. If you call us when there's problems early on, or you call the commercial tenancy advisors when there's problems early on, we can get involved. You may not necessarily have a legal right, but there's practical issues in terms of terminating leases. So we can always get in touch with the landlord and see if there is some scope for negotiation early on. If you just let it run and wait till you rock up to your premises and you can't get in that morning, there's not much we can do. So we always say get in front of the problem.
Get in front of that storm.
Yep.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Chantelle Barrett. She's good, isn't she?
No problem at all.
Wow.
I think you guys are going to have more than the 421 cases after this, actually.
Yeah. So remember, if you are running a business and you don't have time for disputes and lawyers and court cases, it's great to hear that there's help available at the SBDC. And the most amazing thing is that the advice and help is for free. And the little bit you have to pay for is pretty affordable. Yeah, affordable and very worth it. Oh my goodness, saving your sanity and that stuff is priceless. Thank you so much for joining us, Chantelle Barrett.
Not a problem at all.
And Kat Paz, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Taking care of business. We'll be back next week on Monday at 10:30.